Hey, my name is Alberto Duque. I'm a third year medical student, and tonight we're going to talk about a mysterious and not so well known structure. We're going to talk about the cerebellum. So let's begin. So this is the brain. The cerebellum is right here, as you can see. And this presentation we're talking about what is the cerebellum, the anatomy, that is the branch of biology that is concerned with the study of the structure of organisms and their parts, the histology, that is the branch of the biology which studies the tissues of animals and plants using microscopy, the circuit, that is the working way of the cerebellum, and the pathology, that is a medical specialty that is concerned with the diagnosis of disease. All of this regarding the cerebellum, of course. So, what is the cerebellum? The cerebellum is a structure that is located in the back of the brain. It's underlying of the occipital and temporal lobes of the cerebral cortex. It represents approximately 10% of the total volume of the brain, and it contains 50% of total brain neurons. And the cerebellum is involved with the coordination of voluntary movements, as well as the posture and balance, and motor learning, with some other cognitive functions. The cerebellum, as we already said, it's an organ of the central nervous system, and it's located in the posterior pit of the skull, and it's divided into three main components: the archicerebellum, the paleocerebellum, and the neocerebellum. So right here we have the cerebellum, and it's painted with three colors that corresponds to each part of the cerebellum that we explained before. So this is the inferior face. That means that this is a lower view. If you're looking from the bottom to the top of the cerebellum, you can see this image right here, and you can see the anterior lobe in color red, the flocculonodular lobe in color blue, and the posterior lobe in color green. On the other hand, if you are looking at from an upper view, from the superior face of the cerebellum, you can see the anterior lobe in color red and the posterior lobe in color green. So, the phylogenetic and functional description. When we talk about phylogenetics, we're talking about the study of the evolutionary history and the relationship with some individuals in certain species. So, phylogenetically talking, the cerebellum developed on different times of evolution history. It developed on three main structures that appeared on different organisms. So the first structure was the archicerebellum, that it could be traced back to the fishes, and it's the part of the cerebellum that is in charge of the equilibrium and balance. It is located on the flocculonodular lobe, and the nucleus that is in charge is the fastigial nucleus. When we talk about a nucleus, we are referring to a group of neurons that has a specific function and are located on a specific part of the brain. I'm going to show you the location of this nucleus on the next slide. So the next structure that developed appeared on amphibians, and it was the paleocerebellum. It has the function to coordinate the postural tonic. This refers to the way that individuals assume a posture and can stand on 2 feet, for example. The polycerebellum is located in the anterior lobe that I mentioned in color red on the previous slide. And the nucleus that is in charge is the interposal nucleus. It consists of 2 main parts, that is the emboliform and the globose. And finally, the last part that developed on evolution history was the neocerebellum, that it appeared on mammals, and is a structure that has the task to plan fine movements, and not only fine but also complex movements. It is located on the posterior lobe, and the nucleus that is in charge is the dentate nucleus. So as I told you, the nucleus has a certain location in the brain. This is a cerebellum. If you cut it in a half, this is a transversal cut of the cerebellum, and this is the inner or the middle part of this organ. As you can see, there are some parts that are more dark than the others, and these parts are the nucleus, the group of neurons. Right here you can find the fastigial nucleus that I mentioned you before, and this is the globose and emboliform nucleus. These 2 structures constitute the interposal nucleus. And finally, you can find the dentate nucleus, that it received its name because it looks like a tooth. It forms like the teeth. I'm going to do a little emphasis on the neocerebellum because it's an important structure. It's the largest part of the cerebellum, as well as the newest and most developed part. Only humans have it, and this confirms that we are the most developed animals. The neocerebellum intervenes mainly in the coordination of motor activity, but not all motor activity, but the fine and more complex movements. For example, driving a car. This is something that animals can't do because they don't have a neocerebellum. The histology is the study of the tissues using microscopes, and this is the image that you get when you cut a little part of the cerebellum and you put it on a microscope. So scientists identify 3 layers: the molecular layer right here, the Purkinje cell layer, and the granular cell layer. Each layer has different type of neurons. As you can see on the image, every single purple or darkest point corresponds to a neuron itself. The color, or the purple color, it's because it's the way the DNA is painted when you put some coloration on it. So right here, these are the Purkinje cells, the biggest and most important cells of the cerebellum. And there are another type of cells on other layers, like it is the basket cells and the granulose cells. The granulose layer, it's called that way because it contains the granulose cells. So together all these neurons makes a circuit. This circuit is made of some signals that are either excitatory or inhibitory. But what is important is that the last sign of the cerebellum, it's an inhibitory impulse that comes from the Purkinje cell, that it's the most important cell. This inhibitory signal modulates the signals that comes from the brain to do a certain movement. So the inhibition is what makes possible that the movements are more fine and more specific. And finally, we are talking about pathology. Pathology is the study of diseases. I'm going to mention what happens when the cerebellum is compromised. So as you can see here on red, you can find a brain tumor. This is a tumor that is located on the cerebellum with an study that it's called a tomography. So when there is a damage on cerebellum, what you may find is basically a damage on the functions that it is in charge of. For example, if the cerebellum is in charge of coordination, the coordination of a sick patient will be damaged. This is a medical term that it's called ataxia, and corresponds to the uncoordination of voluntary movements. Also, it is quite possible that the gait and the balance of a person is compromised when there's a pathology on the cerebellum. So the patient you may find the patient with instability, and he must expand the base of support, so he must separate the feet in order not to fall. This patient also has a characteristic march that resembles the one of a drunken person. This is called the drunken gait. And you can find hypotonia. Normally the muscles have a tone that is the grade in which they are contracted, but when the cerebellum is compromised, you may find weakness on several group of muscles. You can also find intentional trembling. This is a tremor that happens when people try to do a specific action and their extremities, for example, their arms or their feet, will start to tremble. This is a phenomenon that is opposite to a tremor that begins at rest, and this tremor that begins at rest corresponds to Parkinson's disease instead of a compromise or a pathology in the cerebellum. And finally, you can find also the nystagmus. Nystagmus is a condition of involuntary eye movement. This is what the image shows, a person with nystagmus. And it has been called dancing eyes because they move from one side to another without voluntary impulse. It is related to some cerebral disorders such as tumors, strokes, or trauma. And that was basically a resume of what cerebellum does, and I hope that you like this presentation. Best regards, teacher, and thanks for everything.